And good. It's actually afternoon now, even though it feels like morning. You are watching the FPL. Here we go. Net That Haul matchups show for Gameweek 24. Sorry for the confusion. It all went wrong when I pressed the wrong button in the intro, and the song didn't play, and I was like, what happened? And I pressed the overlay instead of the video clip. So already off to a magnificently amateurish start. Getting started here. I am Gabe. I'm joined here by Craig, man on pod _ Craig. How are you this afternoon now?
Yeah, I'm doing good. Amateur hour everywhere here, right? Look at this cropping on the visual on the screen as well. That looks a bit amateur as well. Is that someone you're trying to cover someone up there, Gabe? It looks like.
Yeah, that's right. Speaking of amateur hour, if you are on the podcast and you want to see this in the YouTube, our graphic, our thumb for the show today is a little amateurishly done. And I mean, I don't know. That's Nima's department. I think he's gonna have to get on top of his department and track down where this went wrong. But obviously there's one player that stands out over all the rest from Gameweek 23, and it's not the one that's hiding.
Yeah, I'm just trying to work out who that is behind. It must be Mo Salah right behind. I think must be Mo Salah.
It's really hard to tell. I think it's just impossible to tell. It's time to move on. We are featuring Mateus Cunha though, and in no small reason. Because he's coming off of a monster haul, of course, but also Hee Chan Huang is coming back, and I think things could be changing for him. So I'm going to rationalize it that way. We're going to jump right into this 2 minutes in. Thanks for joining us in the chat. We have several friends in there. We're going to give it a few minutes for some more people to join us before we say hello there, Craig. And as people kind of like a mosey their way in here, I do want to take a moment and give a shout out to Mariner, who's dealing with some heavy life things, and I want to shout him out because I want to tell him that it's raining in the desert here today, Mariner. It's raining in the desert. If you know, you know. He will certainly understand what that means. And with that thought, let's get into the philosophy, Craig.
It's actually legit raining here as well, where I am in London. So raining for everyone. Hurry up.
No shocker there, right? You're shocked to see the sun every once in a while. This week's FPL philosophy for Gameweek 24 comes to us from a personal favorite and I think a crowd favorite here, Lao Tzu, and he says, "Act without expectation." A very simple philosophy for the week, and what I like about this one is, acting without expectation really puts us in the moment of acting and makes sure that we're doing what we're doing for the sake of doing it itself. Like the act of doing something is in itself. You don't have to justify an act, or it doesn't have to be worthy because you expect some outcome or because it's attached to some goal or something like that. And then if it doesn't meet that goal, then was that the process of acting and of analyzing, then was that also a failure? So so I think like seeing things like without expectation can kind of liberate us from this kind of like success failure binary. What do you think?
I like it in logical principle, but it's just not something I can do. I would really struggle with this as a philosophy because I always put expectation on decisions that I make. I think you always make a transfer and think, how many points am I going to get over the 4 or 5 weeks? And you maybe, I feel like I'm at least reasonable in the sense I'm maybe a bit more pessimistic with like the points tally. I would put an expectation on someone. Like some people, for example, bring out your favourite here, Darwin Gabe. We'll bring him in for the next 2 game weeks. We've got Burnley and then we've got a double. Some people go into that with the mindset and the expectation that he's going to get 25 points or something across those 2 game weeks, where I would probably be in there thinking, 1 goal and 1 assist or something is probably pretty reasonable from him. So if I can get 13 to 15 points, and I would still be obviously disappointed if he didn't reach that. But because I set myself that the sort of lower end of expectation, then it's probably a bit easier to live with. But people that, for example, play a bench boost and go in there thinking I'm going to get 30 points this week and then get 10, then the sense of disappointment is worse. So I don't think you can play FPL very well without expectation, because I think every time you make a move, you're expecting something. But I think it's more the case that you have to be a bit realistic, maybe. And I think that's the challenge when you play more and more and for longer. You maybe realise now, don't set yourself such high expectations, because then the disappointment isn't so bad afterwards. Because most of the time, things rarely reach their expectation, right? Unless you captain Dolly Watkins in the last game week, then you probably exceeded your expectations, but quite unusual.
But you set the bar low, so I think that's a really interesting I think response to this, and I wonder if there's an element of equating the expectation with the process itself. Like you can have that process, that getting a certain player at a certain time. Let's just say, to use your example, bringing in Diogo Jota for the next three, because he has three games in the next 2 game weeks, and they're good fixtures and so on. Isn't that act and that process in itself worthy enough of the act without having to have the expectation? And then the other thing I'll add is, if you go from having like big expectations, right, to having small expectations, and that feels better. Imagine if you go from small expectations to no expectations. Like if you continue that like a path, then you might feel even better.
Yeah, if you go in with just the act, you'd be bringing in Harvey Elliott, wouldn't you? Or you'd be bringing in Kanate, or you'd be bringing in someone like that. Because that's the principle.
Harvey
if
Barnes.
You just played it for if you're just playing it for the fixtures, you'll bring in someone with just to tick that box. You're not bringing in someone who you expect to get a lot of points. It's just the mindset more that you want the extra games. It doesn't really matter who it is, because it's someone that has the capabilities of playing the extra games. I like it as a philosophy, though. I think it gets people thinking. And for me personally, last thing for me on this is that the longer I spend in a game week sort of mulling over what to do, changing my mind, going back and forward, I think the higher the expectation I put on it. So there's some weeks where the move is quite straightforward, I feel like, and I don't think a lot about what I'm going to do in terms of my transfer. And then I'm quite realistic with my expectation. But this block of games coming up now, where there's doubles and there's blanks and things, it feels quite pivotal to at least feel like within yourself you made the right choice, whether that's to play a chip, whether that's to take a hit, whether that's to do all these sorts of things. And invariably you end up with 4 or 5 plans and sort of you go back and forward about what you're going to do. And because you spent so many hours, or in my case, I could easily spend so many hours over the course of a game week now mulling over what to do next, that I think my sort of expectation gets higher, because I feel like I deserve more and want more, because I've committed so much more of my free time to it than I would in a normal week. So that's something to sort of, for me personally, it impacts me as well.
Yeah. That's fair enough. That's a good discussion. Hopefully gets the wheels turning as we get into the show here. Before we do get into the show properly here, let's say hello to some people in the chat. Blue Danube Joe's in the house. What's up? Podna says what's up. Ballroom Jam, FPL Discomfort, Kieran's in there. Big Mike is in there. Comb Boogler, our Fulham resident, is in there. Interested to hear his thoughts. FPL Crop Duster, Alex makes an appearance. Nice to see you, Alex. Nima, of course. Nima never misses, man. Nima is like, he's like the eternal friend. He's like Teddy Ruxpin, my buddy. He's my buddy and me. I don't know if you guys had that over there in the UK. When I was growing up in Canada, we had Teddy Ruxpin. Claire is in the house. Claire FPL, how you doing? Ignatius Bryan is in. Who else? Scrolling through here. Elron Cupboard is joining us. Clint 1FDE is here as well. And we already have some questions, some great questions coming in. Throw the questions in the chat there, and we'll star them and get to them at the end. One thing about this show is Mariner, with everything he has going on, we don't have his thing, so we don't have a captaincy metric today. But instead of the captaincy metric, we have a little bit of a surprise. Actually, it comes to us from a Discord request. From who was it that asked for that? Dr. Green Thumb. Dr. Green Thumb requested kind of like some wildcard talk on Discord. So we're gonna go through maybe a wildcard draft. And I think, Craig, your decisions for this game week in general are kind of like talking through a wild card anyway, because there's so many ways you could go. So we'll get to that as well. As we get into the first matchup, fixture here. Don't forget to like the stream if you've liked anything so far. If not, wait for something you like and then like the stream, and certainly like it on the way out. Here we go. First match. Manchester City versus Everton. Manchester City with a NetxG of 1.99. Everton 1.11. The shot-based goal predictors don't kind of line up with all of the rest of the metrics. Well, they line up for Everton, but not for City, which probably kind of speaks to how clinical City have been recently. Some of the stats I have up here in regards to that: Manchester City clinical with 17 goals from 11.45 xG at home and this is in their last 6 home. Their shot stats, let's see, their joint second best shots inside the box in the last 6 with 14. Let's see. And Everton, poor left zonal is bad news for service from McNeil. It's kind of like the only thing that might light up for Everton is something from McNeil. The way they beat Brighton last season, but that one does not light up. So one tactical thing here is I don't know if Nathan Patterson will come and play in this one. I think if Nathan Patterson comes and plays, then it'll be Grealish starting. It makes more sense for Grealish to start, both from a tactical perspective and from a perspective that Champions League is about to start. He needs to get some minutes, so it would make sense for Grealish. But if Dyche is going to go with like who's a Godfrey at right back and Ashley Young in front of him, I think Doku running at both of those players would be lethal. If I were to guess, I wrote in my thread that I think it would be Doku, and now I'm kind of wavering on that because I think Dyche will throw Patterson back in there and kind of force Grealish to dribble inside rather than Doku to dribble at them. How do you see this one, bud?
I think the big decision is how attacking will Man City be. I didn't really expect them to play what you call the 5 attackers that they obviously played against Brentford. Brentford, obviously a big physical team, same way Everton are, not quite the same tactically, but they both tend to be quite direct and play for the physicality. And I thought Man City would go with sort of that double sort of pivot in midfield with someone else next to Rodri, but they obviously went with Foden left, Alvarez in the half space, De Bruyne in the other half space, and Bernardo right, all behind Haaland. And Rodri was kind of more isolated than he sometimes is as a DM. The fact they're at home here, and I would say against a similar enough team, makes me wonder, will they try something different again? It might not be the same 5 attackers, but will they still play Rodri as sort of a lone sort of number 6 and let the 5 attackers sort of influence the game? And as you say, that could be Grealish or Doku off the left. Maybe Foden plays infield a little bit, and maybe Alvarez gets a rest in this game or something. I'm not quite sure how the front 5 will line up, but will they play that, or will they go back to a more familiar shape? The one thing you would expect from Man City is, I don't know if this is a game for Ake, because you kind of know what Everton's main threat is, to try and load the box with long balls and corners and things like that. Ake being one of the smaller defenders. I know he's not particularly bad in the air, but we saw for the goal against Brentford that he got levered out of the way by Tony in a physical battle, and Everton and Brentford scored. So I could see Man City going with more of a sort of giant back four, for want of a better phrase. It could be Gvardiol, or it could be, I don't know, maybe Stones plays this game next to Diaz or something, and Walker, especially if Walker's got to try and get out quickly to shut McNeil down, to stop him getting crosses in the box quickly, or Mikalenko. I'm guessing Walker will certainly play this game to try and shut that supplier down from the left. Do you think they'll move Foden, though? The fact he's just got a hat-trick in the last game, and obviously I think there's a feeling now that it was a sort of coming-of-age game for him against Brentford. Very rarely has he sort of led the attack in the way he did in that game, with De Bruyne in the team, with obviously Haaland in the team. It was still very much a sort of Foden poster boy performance almost. Do you think they'll want to change from that, or do you think doesn't matter, because Pep always picks his team depending on the fixture, and so what worked well in the last game, he's more than happy just to sort of knock that on the head for a few weeks.
I mean, I think he makes slight changes, but I don't see that I don't see that Manchester City and Foden performance, I guess, the way most people do. I don't see it as a coming of age for Foden or anything like that. I don't even see it as he led the team offensively. I see it as he ended up in the right pockets at the right time, kind of thing. But he wasn't the offensive impetus of the team by any means. If anything, that was well, from a little bit of a, so the way I saw that game was Kevin De Bruyne, he was ping ponging from one side to the other side, and he was like creating like in the corners, but he wasn't near the box. With that many attackers playing, Kevin De Bruyne was also like just outside the box and wide. He was on both sides, so I didn't really see him as much in the half space as I did outside. And I think I think they could do something similar here against Everton, because I think they're going to want to kind of isolate the outside backs if it's Patterson on the right or one of the other two, and Mykolenko on the left, especially if Mykolenko tries to get forward at all. Foden could maybe run into those spaces, but I didn't see a kind of systemic Manchester City shift to feature Foden anymore. To feature Foden more.
I'm just hoping he doesn't get back out on the right side again, because I think naturally he doesn't get into the box as much from that position. He can still score goals and drift in field and things like that. But as you say, he was in the right spaces at the right times. But I think he was allowed to do that by the fact he was more playing off the left. I've said for quite a while, I'd like to see him play in the role that David Silva played a couple of years ago when sort of his latter years at Man City. I think Foden could do a really good job doing that. But he needs to be on that left side of the pitch as playing 1-2s and drifting around into space. And when they use him off the right, he doesn't really do that. But then also Bernardo's a little bit wasted as well, isn't he? When he's used off the right, he's obviously got attributes that are good to keep the team moving forward and ticking over, and he doesn't have the same impact out there. I guess they're just a bit short at the moment of someone with the ideal sort of profile to play on the right, so they're having to play someone else out there who can do a job, but it's maybe not their most useful position. And it's probably the hardest thing to predict about Foden right now, isn't it? Where he's going to play game to game.
Yeah, and he was more on the left against Brentford, but I think it depends. Like that right hand side, it's just Pep is going to do something different with that right hand side. You know, the right, that's why Bernardo Silva can play there, because he can hold it deeper and use it to spread the defense and then attack from the other side. So I just think Pep right now, given the players he has, he's resigned to not penetrating from that side, but stretching the defense and drawing them out a little bit. But I think that just to get to like maybe the standout picks here, obviously Holland is always a standout pick if he starts, and at home I think this one does line up okay for him, despite what Everton are going to try to do to frustrate him and be physical. But I really like them attacking that Everton's right hand side, even if Patterson starts. I think they could get something from there. So I would favor, I would just favor the left side of the field, which makes sense for Manchester City, given the way they played.
I am a bit weary for Haaland here, because I only remember, obviously, Everton played Aston Villa a couple of weeks ago in a 0-0 draw, and Tarkowski in particular in that game was very rough. I would say quite fair, but often when he went to win the ball, he followed through onto the player afterwards. Now, you could say that there's no need for that, and that should still be a foul, but he has played the ball first. And given the sort of injury Haaland's just had, I wonder if Everton will be sort of tasked with, I won't call it dirty tactics, but to say it's fair in the sense that he's gone to play the ball and played the ball first. But there's obviously ways that you can control your movements after you play the ball. And I think Tarkowski, particularly in that game, is very good at following through on people. And I say if Haaland maybe he's not fully fit and has got his injury is more of a bruise type injury than a muscle pull, isn't it? I wonder if they could do something in this game that maybe re-injure him. Just a side thought, because he is the logical captain based on fixtures, but I'm a bit worried how many minutes he'll get in this game and whether he'll get sort of a reoccurrence of the injury, depending on how Everton defend against him.
Mm-hmm. All right, I think we can move on to. I think we can move on to the next fixture, unless you have anything to add here.
Yeah. No, we can go on.
Fulham versus Bournemouth next. Fulham NetxG 1.72, Bournemouth 1.42. Shot goal predictors are pretty muted. Nothing of note really there. In the zonals, we have Bournemouth's left and Fulham's flanks, especially the right hand side. And I do want to talk about that a little bit, but so I'll start with Fulham's right a little bit. So it's going to be De Cordova-Reid on that right hand side, I guess. I would prefer somebody that would create for others for Fulham, but that's not really Bobby De Cordova-Reid. But I think he can still get something. The Bournemouth chances conceded heat map there kind of shows it as well, kind of the bright orange on that side. But I think there's also an opportunity for Fulham on the left side with Kearney and William. Kearney playing that left center mid role and William playing wider. If they can combine and even get Anthony Robinson involved, I think that there could be something there for Fulham from both sides, and it is indicated there in the zonals a little bit. And then Bournemouth's left. I mean, Bournemouth are. It's interesting that how much certain teams rely on certain players, and I think Tavernier is one of those players for Bournemouth. Now, it obviously doesn't help. Semenyo comes back from AFCON and he was poor last game, so they do need that kind of balance on the other side. But I think the reintroduction of Tavernier on the left side is just a benefit for Solanke. And kind of puts Solanke kind of back into consideration as people are selling.
Yeah, as I might be selling, because he's the obvious route for me to get to, to say it again, second mention of the night for Darwin Núñez. But obviously there's an appeal for him for the next couple of weeks. I'm not going to sell my other two strikers, who are Haaland and Tony, who obviously both double in game week 25. So if I do want the third doubling striker of Darwin, Solanke's the obvious sell. And his fixtures, I think this fixture's fine for him. I wouldn't be desperate to sell him for this fixture per se, but the next batch after this until the new double now in game week 28 are not the best. So if we're in a position now where we've got some transfers to do some juggling around of strikers week to week, then I don't think Solanke's maybe necessary for a couple of weeks. He's certainly disposable for a couple of weeks, but then we are going to want him back to probably captain him in game week 28. So one of my big my team is that decision this week that, do I see Solanke getting enough from this game to at least match Darwin at home to Burnley? And my gut feeling is I think he could, because he's been a bit frustrating actually the last couple of weeks, Solanke. I think I captained him twice in 4 weeks. He's got nothing in either of them. So I feel like he owes me something. But I agree that maybe the supply line hasn't really been there for him in the last couple of weeks. The same way as that goal against West Ham, basically when Calvin Phillips basically passed in the ball to kick into the empty goal, right? That's all he's really done for a couple of weeks, it feels like. So yeah, I think Bournemouth have maybe slipped off a little bit, maybe not quite as dangerous as they looked maybe 5-6 weeks ago. Fulham are never a team that I'm massively confident in defensively. I think in odd games they look really good, in other games they look awful. I think they're one of the more inconsistent teams in the league. This feels like a score draw, but I wouldn't really want to put a prediction on who's going to get any returns in this. This feels like a bit of a lottery game to me, in terms of result and in terms of who's going to get the points. I don't think there's a clear standout area where you think there's a mismatch here or an overload here or something. I think it's really hard to call.
Yeah, I think the fact that it's away to Fulham makes it that much more difficult for Solanke, and certainly another reason, if you're looking for another reason to sell him, and you're not comfortable because you know he's going to score. Yeah, I agree. I think he's gonna. I just think Solanke will get something here, and not necessarily punish sellers, but because you're thinking of a bigger picture, especially if you're selling for Darwin, right? Darwin's got a great fixture this week as well, and he's got the double. So, but I mean, last time I thought in those lines, I missed out on Watkins and Saka points, and that was quite recent. So, I don't know. Good luck to that. There are some comments here. Remember to leave your questions there in the chat, and we'll go to the next one. Speaking Speaking of said fixture, we have Liverpool versus Burnley. Liverpool 2.27 NetxG, Burnley 0.99. Burnley bright red, Liverpool bright green for kind of across the board. Liverpool, look at a 58% chance of 2 or more goals for Liverpool. I've got everybody's like jumping for a piece of that. The central and right zonal matchups pop up 5.8, 5.1. When both of those pop up together, my thoughts always turn to Trent. And if NetxG is below 1, it just kind of screams Trent Hall. Now, if we think of how like different ways Trent can haul, or even how Liverpool will line up, I'm curious to get your thoughts on this, Craig. Because I'm thinking Liverpool are going to line up actually with Diaz on the right hand side, stretching the defense for Trent to step in and kind of serve balls into the box. Now those balls can either hit Darwin Nunez coming in from the left side on his diagonal runs, or Jota on kind of like the near the right half space, or even Jota in the air. I do see a kind of a headed goal for Liverpool here, and that's likely served up by Trent, be it to Jota from an open play, or from a corner, or to Van Dijk from a set piece or something like that. But I'd like to get your thoughts kind of like tactically on this one, what you think, and then let's go best 3 Liverpool assets for the next 2 weeks.
I remember this game really vividly from when they played. I think it was Boxing Day. Obviously, in the reverse fixture, Liverpool won 2-0, but they absolutely battered Burnley. I think Trafford made about 12 saves in that game. And interestingly, Gakpo started through the middle and was very good. They played Darwin off the left, and obviously Salah was off the right. So I think he's available, Gakpo, for this game. I've got some reservations over whether Jota will start this. Or whether they'll just play that same, well, obviously no Salah, so will they play Jota or Diaz down the right? But the way Gakpo sort of manoeuvred the defence around the last time these two teams played is obviously a saying, if it's not broken, don't fix it. So given that tactic and that style worked so well the first time round, why would Liverpool adapt? Because I don't feel like Burnley are going to massively adapt. They only really know one real way to play. There's maybe some subtle differences in the way they press and the way they hold the ball. And I think as the season wears on, they're a little less focused on possession compared to earlier in the season. But from the Liverpool standpoint, Trent was heavily involved. The Liverpool right side was heavily involved that first time round. But Gakpo through the middle was very important to what went well for Liverpool that game, dragging defenders around, and then Salah and Darwin from the wide areas running into the spaces that Gakpo vacated. So that thought process is putting me off Jota a little bit here for this game. And the fact that in game week 25, I'm jumping ahead obviously a game week here, but Liverpool then got the early kickoff. So we obviously want Liverpool players for this fixture, but we're also, if we're buying them now, we're buying them for double game week 25 as well. And realistically, there's a good chance we'll get some sort of leak, I would think, for game week 25 as it's the early kickoff. So how infuriated would I be if I bought Jota, for example, for this game? He was benched, and then we found out that he was benched as well for the first game of double game week 25. You would still expect him to get minutes in that and then play the second game of double game week 25, but he's still going to get minutes in the 3 fixtures. But I still think there's enough sort of rotation possible here from Liverpool that I'm just not secure on any of the attackers' minutes over the next 2 game weeks to really want to start taking hits and things like that to get them in. So from a matchup perspective, I like Gakpo if he plays through the middle. I think the Liverpool right side will be stronger, but we don't know if that will be Jota or Diaz. Really good game for Trent, potentially really good game for Van Dijk, because Burnley, as we've seen before, made a right mess of it against Everton, trying to defend sort of corners and long balls. I think Van Dijk could be really good attacking set pieces for this game. He's the one I'm edging towards signing for my team this week from this, because of all of the outfield players, I like his minutes more over the 3 fixtures of the next 2 game weeks. I think he's got reasonable chance of an attacking return in this. The clean sheet is probably 50-50. And then going into the double, I think he's more likely to play 180 minutes than a lot of the outfield players. So he's actually become my main sort of Liverpool target as the week's gone on here. But I accept there's probably other outfield players with more upside, mainly Trent and obviously all of the attackers.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think I couldn't see it more differently. So in that game, the last time they played in the 2-0, there was massive rotation across the squad in that game. So I'm looking at the lineup here. Harvey Elliott started. Gravenberch started. This was before he was a regular starter. Kwanzaa started. Joe Gomez played left back. Now, granted, there were obviously like Andrew Robertson's out with injury and so on and so forth, but Jota was on the bench, Diaz was on the bench, Szoboszlai was on the bench, and Curtis Jones was on the bench. So I don't think that's what Liverpool are trying to do. I think it was just a heavy rotation during congested fixture period against a low level team, and they don't need to do that in this one. So and certainly if you're going to rotate, and we saw it last weekend, right? It's Jota's not the one you rotate. He's your best finisher. He's the one he's your biggest threat right now until Salah gets back. So I don't see Jota being rotated at all. I think absolutely first choice, absolutely the go-to player to score the Liverpool goals. And I think you're right, that right-hand side will create for the center. I see Jota in the middle, and I see like if Diaz on the right-hand side, but not really as a real threat. I do think I don't think the finishes will come from that right side. I think the finishes will come in the middle as the Burnley center backs can get caught kind of like playing a little too wide there. And then the last thing I'll say, and that the reason I don't like the left so much is because Burnley have a new right back. His name is Assignon, and Assignon had a fantastic game in their last one, and I think he could shut down that left hand side. I don't know how fast he is my only thing. If whether it's Diaz or Darwin, if they're in any kind of space, they might be able to beat him. But Assignon is a solid defender, at least from what we've seen so far.
He's the only right back I've ever seen, I think, get an assist from the left wing. That was the last game, wasn't it? He ended up there was a counter attack from a corner, I think, and he ended up bursting down the left wing for some strange reason, and actually put a left-footed cross in for Palmer to score. Right, very strange. Not what I expected on debut, the right back to assist from the left wing, but it didn't look overly rapid chasing the ball down the left wing. To be fair, I've got minimal knowledge of him. I don't know a lot about him, but from watching him run down the left wing for that goal, it didn't look overly quick, but.
No.
We'll see. I can't comment really. It's sort of one moment in one game.
Yeah, and it's funny that play shows up there in the heat map, the fourth image there, on the right hand side. There's two lone spot, that one lone spot on the left wing, just outside the box there. So he snags an assist there. All right, cool. So I'm guessing if just in a vacuum, top 3 Liverpool assets for the next 2 game weeks.
The 3 I'm considering are Van Dijk, Trent, and Darwin. But I don't own any at the moment, so I've got full choice of all of them. So I'm completely impartial to this because, say, they're all open to me. But at the moment, my priority order is probably Van Dijk first, Darwin second, and Trent third.
Interesting. I don't mind the Van Dijk shout, and I do think he could get a headed goal in this one, but I think it's Trent serving it up. I don't think I could pass on the upside of Trent. So I would go Trent. Jota for me is number 1. He's top asset to get, since he is like who they rely on to score goals. Then I go Trent because of the different variety, different ways for points. And then it depends. If it's just for those 2 weeks, like we said, in a vacuum, then I would probably go for the upside of Darwin over the safety of Van Dijk. But yeah, so it's interesting how we view that one a little bit differently here. And I know you have 2 free transfers, so I'll be interested to see, like, at the end when we look at the summary here, how you're thinking of them. And I know like Darwin's top of the list.
It's just the minutes, isn't it? How many will Trent play with Conor Bradley around and playing well, and the cup final to come after the double? How many minutes will Trent get over the next 2 game weeks? I agree that in normal circumstances you'd pick him, but just because he's been injured, he's now got someone else that can play in his position. I know they're very different players, and I'm not suggesting that Bradley's going to displace Trent and get Trent out of the team, but I think they can afford to maybe rest Trent a bit more now with him there. So I only want a Liverpool player for 2 weeks and I want to sell him again. So I may as well pick the one that I feel like is going to play 270 minutes rather than someone who might only play like 150 over the next 2 game weeks or something. But this is where each team's different, right? We've all got different roles from our players. You might want your Liverpool player for 5 weeks. You may be wildcarding straight after game week 25 or something. So it's individual circumstances who we want at the moment. But say fitting what I need from my team, I think those safe minutes from Van Dijk is probably more important at the minute, especially because I'm likely to bench boost next week. So it fits into that as well.
Yeah, especially you're staking another chip on the minutes, so that does make sense, and you're right. I think it's a good point to make. Connor Bradley is not he's not supplanting Trent. He's not a threat to Trent in any way. If anything, he enables Trent for more important situations and stuff like that. Like now they know that they have somebody, and maybe they've known for a while, but they've just haven't been able to put him out there for some reason. But yeah. I think that's a good point. Let's move on to the next fixture. as people in the chat are, Ignatius says, Gabe finally go with Darwin. Comberg, Gabe wants Darwin. Stop spreading fake news, people. It's fake news.
You did put him third begrudgingly, Gabe. I think we'll say you put him in begrudging third, a long distance behind the other two. Begrudging third.
Exactly. That's exactly right. Because I didn't want to hear about it. Like he doesn't have to be prominent in my predictions. So put him at the end of the predictions, and I give him something so we don't have to talk about him. So, speaking of high flying attacks, we have Luton hosting Sheffield United. Luton with a NetxG of 2.08 at home compared to Sheffield United 1.15. Obviously, a combination of Luton's recent form and Sheffield United just being abysmal, especially away from home. I wrote here that Luton have nearly 50% shot on target to goal conversion, converting 13 of their scoring 13 goals out of 28 shots on target at home. So they're quite clinical in their finishing. The definitely one touch finishing and heading kind of team. Left zonal for Luton stands out a little bit there, so all eyes turn to Alfie Doughty. But let's see, Sheffield United with an interesting the goal prediction based on shots here is interesting for Sheffield United. Luton have the most shots per 90 conceded at home, 15.5 shots per 90 conceded at home. So that's kind of playing favorably in Sheffield United's direction there. One thing I'll say about Luton is with Alfie Doughty whipping dangerous crosses in from the left, and Ogbene converted wing back. Now he's not playing wing anymore at wing back, dribbling and penetrating lines and getting around and using his speed. Yeah, poor Dan Burn is still licking his wounds. Luton's attack is kind of taking shape here, and teams are going to have to adjust when they play Luton. How do you see this one?
Yeah, I think the best attacks are when the two wide players are very different types of players. Like Saka and Martinelli, obviously very different. One more of a runner, one more of a dribbler, those sorts of things. You've got two very different here. One just wants to get the ball and play a first-time cross, and the other one's prepared to run at people. And it mixes up the threat, doesn't it? I can't say I've taken Luton that seriously until last week. I maybe harshly took the mindset that teams were underestimating them, and then therefore sort of committed a few too many bodies forward or something, and Luton caught them sort of cold on the break. But I'm coming around to the idea now that that's maybe not quite right, and they deserve a bit more respect than what I've been giving them. I think they have adapted as the season's gone on. I think Barkley is very important through midfield in terms of sort of being able to deal with a press. If teams do get to press them, I think he can sort of manipulate that and get them moving forward from there. And they've got strikers at the moment that are full of confidence, and I think any striker, when they're in a confident mood, are more clinical for it. So the fact that they've got this game against the Sheffield United team that looked like they might be getting marginally better until they were absolutely awful against Villa last week, and now they feel like whipping boys again. So you've got Luton with this fixture, then they've got a double, not as good as some other doubles, but it's still a double. And then now they've got another double in game week 28. They suddenly become on the radar, don't they? And this is my sort of alternative. If I don't go for Van Dijk this week, am I better off going for Alfie Doughty? Because in this fixture, you could argue that his ceiling for points is maybe more than Van Dijk. I think it's an argument. I'm not saying it's definitely going to happen, but I think it's feasible that it could happen. Next week, they both got doubles, and then Doughty you can keep for a couple of game weeks longer because he's got another double that you might want him for and a higher chance to play game week 29 because Liverpool, you think, are going to blank against Everton because they'll get far enough in the FA Cup. So Doughty could actually be quite helpful, or any Luton player, in fact, could be quite helpful now for about 6 or 7 game weeks. Are they good enough to warrant holding someone or more than one player for 6 or 7 game weeks? But if you're going to do it, this is the week to do it, isn't it? Because this is a high upside fixture. Then they've got 2 doubles and a chance to play 29. So they're on my radar. They haven't really been on my radar all season, Luton players. But once that double got dropped in 28, I'm now thinking about maybe that 1 or 2 of their players aren't the worst players to have around, should we say. You certainly want to play them in this game.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. Like Luton's attack now working kind of has us thinking about their assets, but that's what I say. Forget about Darwin, get Adebayo.
You could do if you need the budget, right? He's probably the best budget striker in the game right now. If you are of that mindset that you play with 2 strikers and a budget one, is obviously Cameron Archer for a lot of teams for most of the season. People might have tried to mess around with a Chris Wood or someone like that for a bit, but I don't think there's any doubt in now that if you want an 8th attacker to be a cheaper striker, then it's him, right? And I say he's got confidence. I think they're playing to suit him a little bit more. Obviously, Colton Morris's roles may be adapted. You noticed it against against Brighton, that maybe Colton Morris played a bit deeper, and I think like he did the same against Newcastle. So maybe they've stumbled across sort of a formation and a tactic now that suits them a bit better. And Adebayo is leading the line by himself with 2 players sort of near him. And the team maybe are sort of playing to his strengths all of a sudden. So yeah, I don't dislike him as a move. It's just whether at the moment with Tony with a double coming up, with Darwin with the double, with Haaland with a double, then you've still got Solanke with a double in the future. People still got Watkins and things like that, whether Adebayo is strong enough to displace one of them. But I certainly couldn't put someone off getting him in. Certainly a consideration for it. We'll talk about it at the end about a wild card. I think it's a possibility you stick him in.
Mm-hmm. All right, I think that exhausts this fixture. We'll move quickly on to the next one. This one, yeah, I like goals in this one. Tottenham versus Brighton. Spurs 2.07 NetxG, Brighton 1.27 away. Spurs green goal predictor. You got a 55% chance of 2 or more goals. Minimal goalkeeper influence. And nothing really stands out in the zonals here. Brighton potentially from the flanks, but that's no surprise here. I think the big thing to talk about here is one, those that have gone for Gross. Gross's positioning, as we see, has been quite deep, and that happens. And even when that happens, he can still get something on one of his runs forward. But his runs forward haven't been to the really near the box these days. So Gross, despite I think this could be a decent fixture for him, I think he's a likely sell. And the other thing I wanted to talk about here is it looks like Mitoma's going to come back, and I know there's a lot of talk about Estupinian, and Estupinian was benched last game, and I think this happened before in the season, if I'm not mistaken. I have a vague memory of that. I'll have to look that up. But what I like about Estupinian is that Serbi has been missing this left side for such a long time, and Mitoma coming back after Iran knocked them out, right? It was Iran that eliminated. No, I don't remember how the Asian Cup went, but anyway, I think Mitoma's on his way back. If he plays with Estupinian, that left side could just kind of like reignite the team.
I think this game's hard to call because of all the fixtures, this game's probably the most impacted by people coming back from AFCON and the Asia Cup, right? You've got Brighton now with a couple of players back, most notably Mitoma. And I think we've said on here before that Brighton have had to adapt the last sort of 4 or 5 game weeks from a style they've largely played since De Zerbi has been there, where you say favouring the left side, but it hasn't been like that now for a few weeks because they haven't had the personnel available to play that way. But now they should have the personnel available to play that way if they go back to playing how they used to. And then you've got Tottenham with Son coming back. Will he come straight back into the team? And if he does, who for? You wouldn't think they're going to bench Richarlison, having what he's done the last couple of game weeks. So are they going to bench Werner and stick Son back out on the left, where he wasn't as dangerous maybe in the first sort of handful of game weeks of the season? He was better when he was playing through the middle. So where does he come back in? Does he just come back in and play off the bench for a couple of weeks while they carry on playing how it's been for the last few weeks, Tottenham, and playing well? So tactically, I think this one's quite hard because I'm not confident certainly with Brighton, I'm not quite confident how they're going to play. And Tottenham, I think it's very different if Son's playing compared to if Son's not playing. My gut feeling is that he'll be on the bench and he'll get minutes, and they'll play maybe Kulusevski, Richarlison and Werner again as the front three in this game. I don't know what you think about that. You confident he comes back in, or both of those two come straight back into the team?
Yeah, I think so. I don't think there's any, Spurs need the points. This is not that they're going to need the goals. But I wonder if so I don't think there's any problem with if Werner goes to the bench or whatever, Son can play on the left. I think that's a perfectly viable option. But I wonder if Son goes back at the 9, and because the problem with Spurs right now, where they need the most help, is on the right, and Richarlison can play. Before Richarlison went to, I forget if it was before he went to Spurs or before he went to Everton. The way his career had gone, he had played equally on the left, center, and right. So I think Richarlison could play on the right, because the right for Spurs, just Kulusevski and Brennan Johnson. That's not what Ange needs. Kulusevski's coming into the half space, like he's cutting in on his left and coming into the half space where Porro's trying to cut into, and that's not working there. But Richarlison could play on that right hand side, and Son could play at the 9. So much like Wolves, and for a lot of these teams where there are players coming back, it's kind of like a wait and see to see how that front three develops. Like who and where will people be? I'm not sure. Kulusevski could stay on that right hand side. It could be Kulusevski and Brendan Johnson, and Timo Werner comes out, or Richarlison moves back to the left. I don't know. I don't know how to predict that one.
I think they want pace down the left, though. Tottenham, I think, is the goal, whether it's Son or whether it's Werner. I don't think you'd play Richarlison left here, because the Brighton right side, unless they play Lamptey back in his favoured position at right back and Estupiñán left back, which is possible. But Brighton have obviously been trying other things at right back lately. Van Heck's had a game there, I think, and Milner's played there, Hinchwood's played there. But I think all of those options are quite susceptible to a pacey left-sided player. So some of them aren't natural defenders in the first place, and Van Heck's a centre-back sort of playing there. He's going to get done for pace as well. So I agree. I'm not sure what I've got. Estupiñán and Porro in my team, so I'm not expecting a clean sheet from either. And Estupiñán's borderline probably the one I would have to sell if I did want to go to Van Dijk or if I did want to go to Doughty. So logic would say after the last 2 game weeks, the fact he got subbed off at half time in one and didn't start the next one, that he should go. But I do kind of agree with you that I think it can be quite temperamental with De Zerbi, and especially if they've got a left winger back, that it could be a dangerous mistake selling Estupiñán this week, because I think he could come in handy over the next couple of game weeks, and he might sort of reignite himself and find some form again after obviously a couple of weeks where he's not been so good for him.
Yeah, it is. It's a tough one, but that side is going to be really interesting. The Porro Estupiñán side will be really interesting there. I think we can go. Let's move on to the next one. There do seem to be goals in this one. The one reason to keep Estupiñán over Porro is no blanks, right? Good fixtures for March and no blanks.
I imagine he'll blank 29. They've got Man City. Right. One of those two are going to reach the FA Cup. It's obviously a long way away, and maybe we said when I podded with you last that play what's in front of you. Don't make decisions based on what might be in 6-7 weeks' time. So you shouldn't keep it. You shouldn't ditch your Estupiñán just because he's likely to blank that far down the line. Right. But again, if you're targeting a Trent or you're targeting a Doughty or a Van Dijk, then you've got to sell a defender to do it, right? So if you look at, it depends who you feel like is your weakest defender right now, and because of his sort of uncertainty around minutes, it feels like it's him for me. But I say that could easily come back to bite me on the arse and prove to be the wrong choice.
Right on. We'll move on to the next one here. Wolves versus Brentford. This was one of the more interesting ones of the game week for me. NetxG says Wolves 1.95, Brentford 1.07, bright red for Brentford kind of across the board there. Wolves looking at, everything green except zonals are meh, and even the shot predictor is kind of meh. So let's see like where Wolves data is coming from. They've scored 10 to 15 big chances in the last 6 home games. And they've scored 12 goals from an XG of 8.82. So that overperformance is kind of what's earning Wolves some respect from the data. Brentford data, it's changing with Tony, obviously. They've been kind of scraping by, but now having Tony there and having that this budding partnership between Tony and Maupay is, I'm loving it because of, and I'm loving how many people hate it. I'm finding myself loving like when people hate the partnership because whatever one's a shithousery and the other one's gambling or whatever they want to say. I'm finding I'm enjoying that even more. I loved how Tony had a little conversation with Maupay and sent him flying on that on the goal against City. So this one, what I find interesting from a Wolves perspective is Hee-chan Hwang is coming back, and I included the average position the last time Wolves played Brentford, and Hee-chan Hwang was in the lineup, and that's him number 11 there, way far ahead of anybody else. So with Neto back and the front three of Neto, Hwang, and Cunha, I think we could really see some exciting things from Wolves, and I just like that partnership. And if you are thinking of like, and that'll be a conversation for the wild card as well. I think maybe having Hee-chan Hwang in on a wild card team or bringing him in pretty soon with some nice fixtures coming up could be quite interesting. What do you think?
Yeah, I think in most wildcard teams, you're probably going to want 2 midfielders under 6 million. Now, naturally, most people say Cole Palmer needs to be one of them. But then again, after this week, he plays Man City, then he's got a blank. And now it looks like he's going to blank again in 29. So I think there's an argument now that certainly after this week, you maybe don't need Cole Palmer. And then you've got Garnacho, who's obviously quite a lot cheaper, who's also doing bits at the moment. So you kind of want him as well. So if you're not going to go for Cole Palmer, and I think there's an opportunity not to have him, I think one of the Wolves guys is probably a good option. And particularly for someone like you, Gabe, who's got Jota, I think a Wolves midfielder is the ideal move away from Jota in like 26. Wolves have got Sheffield United that week. Yep. So you've got 2 game weeks now to assess how it's going to work with Hwang coming back and make a decision if Hwang or Neto or someone else or Cunha even, which one of those 3 attackers ends up looking like the best option. So assess it now that they're back for a couple of weeks and then get one in probably in game week 26. And I say from a Liverpool midfielder, it's probably quite a good position to be in because they obviously blank 26. Fixtures aren't great, and they're probably going to blank 29 as well. So I think it is a wait and see. We said it about Tottenham and Brighton, but I think it's a wait and see for Wolves as well. And I'm just not one of those managers that likes to target Brentford because I think in any given fixture, Frank can sort of shut it down. And I'm not. This feels like a midfield battle sort of game. I do think Brentford probably should play 3-5-2. I know that Wolves aren't usually the standard of opposition. That means they play 3-5-2. They usually hold that formation for when they play one of the big 6. But I think they're not going to want to get overloaded here 3v2 in the middle of midfield against Wolves. I don't think so. I think they'll want to keep that battle 3v3, and that will probably give Brentford the best chance of a result. Probably, I would just my gut feeling is this will be quite low scoring, but wouldn't like to predict who's going to win. I don't think you buy anyone from this fixture this week.
I think you get Tony. I don't know. I kind of disagree. I see goals in this fixture. I think you get Tony. Obviously not just this week, but for other reasons as well. If you want to go early on Wolves, if you did go early on Wolves, if you got Hakunya Matata, then you hold. You play comfortably here. And and even players like, and that was always the plan. Wolves was my out after Jota. Jota will go to a Wolves player, and I am glad I'll have a couple of weeks to see who I want to go for. I think Neto's will have more routes to points, sometimes on the end of things, always in the creative areas. It'll probably be between Neto and Hichan, but I think it'll be Hichan Huang. The other thing I'll say is I really like Sergio Reguilon in this, up against Nelson Semedo. Nelson Semedo, obviously we know his weaknesses, and I just see Reguilon's influence kind of growing week to week, and I think that's exactly what this Brentford team have been missing after the loss of Rico Henry. So I think Reguilon changes Brentford almost as much as Shaw changes United, and we'll get to that one shortly.
I've seen him creeping into a few teams actually this week. I know a few people that are playing their wildcard this week, and I hadn't even really looked at Reguilon, but a few people I've seen have crept him into their wildcard drafts. I don't dislike that move. Just a question on Tony for you then, Gabe, quickly before we move on. So if you own Solanke at the moment or Watkins as one of your strikers, and you was planning to move one of those two for Tony, would you do it this week? Bearing in mind, obviously, Solanke's got Fulham. We've already spoken about that. Watkins has got Manchester United. And obviously, Tony's got this fixture. Do you see Tony being better this week than either of those two?
I like Tony more than Watkins.
Okay.
They're both away, right?
Villa at home, I think. Yeah, Villa at home to Manchester United.
All right, Villa at home. That's tough. It's close. It's close. I think what I like more about Tony than Watkins, and again, it's splitting hairs, and it might be better to go into next week with 2 free transfers rather than anticipate one, right? If you can roll one, that's probably better. But I like that for Brentford. It's probably if anything happens, it's probably going to be Tony, recent Maupay goal aside. Whereas for Villa, I don't know that it'll necessarily be Watkins.
Yeah, I think it's fair. I don't disagree. It was just a question because it feels like it's very 50-50 between all three of those this week. It's quite hard to call, isn't it? Who's better and worse from those three?
Yeah, cool. Fair enough. We can move on to the next one. Got, I think, just a few more to go as we approach the hour mark here, Craig. Nottingham Forest versus Newcastle. Interesting data for this one. Nottingham Forest 1.98 NetxG at home. Newcastle 1.37. Nottingham Forest 4.0 left zonal, 4.5 right zonal for Forest. The Dan Burn effect. And then Newcastle, slightly kind of like neutral fixture, I guess we could call it, from central and the right side of the field. Here's it, like just so like this might shock people. Like the data is so green for Forest. So I thought I'd throw up some of Newcastle's kind of conceded stats here. Most shots in the box conceded. This is the last 6 away games. Most shots in the box conceded with 92 shots in the box conceded in 6. Most shots on target conceded, 51. Highest expected goals conceded non-penalty, 17 XG conceded non-penalty.
The Liverpool game, isn't it? The Liverpool game when the XG was about 7 is probably in this window, isn't it?
Yeah, that's right. It is like that's true. Thankfully for them, Darwin Núñez was playing. Most big chances conceded, 27 big chances conceded, and joint most chances conceded from the left, 28 chances conceded from the left, and second most chances conceded from the right, 36. I mean, this just gets worse and worse and worse. Whoops, didn't mean to go forward there. As far as like the tactics or the personnel and stuff, look for Gio Reyna to kind of get more influence there for Forest. And I wrote here that finally we could see Harvey Barnes on the left and Gordon on the right, because there were some positive reports on Gordon, but I think the most recent reports suggest that Gordon will miss this fixture. So Harvey Barnes slides in for Anthony Gordon there on the left-hand side, and the right, I guess, maintained with Murphy, Almiron. Who's there?
Yeah, one of those two. You imagine Almiron will probably start, I would think. Murphy doesn't often play unless there's sort of fitness doubts around others. So I think probably Almiron plays. Callum Wilson fit as well to play through the middle. We think so, don't we, for this game? He came on in the last fixture, so yeah, Wilson should play.
Right.
Be interesting here. You've obviously a 1 year's back playing, having an influence. You've mentioned in your notes there that Reina probably plays instead of Elanga, but it was Elanga and Chris Wood that were the decisive players the last time these two teams played. Again, that was over Christmas when Chris Wood scored the hat-trick, and Elanga, as we pointed out, was the one just sort of exploiting that space in behind Dan Burn. Reina's slightly different sort of wide player to that, so I'm not sure how that will work down that side, because it will seem a bit stupid to take away the big pace option running against Dan Burn. It's quite a predictable strategy now on how to defeat Newcastle. But again, Newcastle don't seem to be doing a great deal to prevent it so far, because Dan Burn's been exposed in the same way in numerous games lately. So I don't know where I stand with this game, because I was looking at getting a Newcastle defender. I know you're quite a big advocate of Trippier at the moment as an option, but just don't feel like Newcastle are going to keep a clean sheet the way things are going. Until I see some noticeable difference in the way they play, I always feel like they're liable to concede against someone. And Forest do have enough sort of pacey players that can sort of exploit space and things. So Newcastle could win this, but I certainly think both teams will probably score, which will put me off getting a Newcastle player in now.
Yeah, especially away from home, I agree. Yeah, both teams will likely score here. Yeah, and it does make sense to go with speed. I don't know if Dan Burn will start. Maybe.
I suppose they could play Livramento left back. I guess it's a possibility. You think they'd more like to do it in a home game, but if they know they're playing up against fast wingers and fast outlets, then horses for courses, right? The manager should pick a team that's best suited to dealing with that. Forest aren't loaded with sort of aerial threats, are they? Obviously, the centre forward will be a physical aerial target, but is he really going to start trying to peel away onto the small fullback for crosses? Maybe he would, but I wouldn't pick that. It's not. There's certainly other games like the likes of Everton, the likes of Brentford, where you think I'll play the bigger fullback rather than the sort of more attacking, maybe more pacier fullback. So yeah, it could happen. It always just feels like he plays Dan Burn when he's fit to me anyhow. So I would be quite surprised if they dropped him or benched him or rotated him, however you want to phrase it. But I guess it's possible for this game. It would make sense as well to do it in this game.
Yeah, as an owner, I'm concerned after he got roasted by forget his name now, but the Luton player that I forget his name that we talked about.
Yeah,
Bene. That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
So some comments there in the chat. I mean, don't turns 30 on that day. Yeah, you know, for those of us that missed the Alvarez birthday goals, maybe Almiron gets some birthday goals. Who knows? Elron Carbert asks, is the Matt Turner dream over? Yeah, from like his meteoric rise. I think he started playing football when he was 16 or something like that. So he's come a long way. Congratulations to him. But yeah, that's over. Sells should take over there. The new signing from Strasbourg, if I'm not mistaken. I think so.
Yeah, I'm not sure on that one actually. Sounds plausible. We'll go with that for now.
We'll go with that. That's right. As we go with that, we can. I think we can move on to the next matchup. West Ham versus Arsenal. Look at all the red here. I love that it's red for everybody when we're expecting something else. 1.22 NetxG for West Ham, 1.17, paltry 1.17 for Arsenal. Deep red shot based goal predictor for West Ham with a, what is that? A 77% chance of 0 or 1 goals for West Ham, which is great. Arsenal center and right, zonal slightly lighting up, but not really too much either. And the one thing that really just stands out here is Raya away. has an awful goalkeeping record. While I'll look up those stats in just a second. I did want to talk about something. This is something I talked with Lucian about a couple days ago on the review show. Is Arteta's 4-2-2-2 that he showed up with against Liverpool. Don't expect to see that in this one. Won't be needed. That kind of trickery won't be needed against West Ham. I don't think so. And it'll be your standard 4-3-3. But the player I really like here, and the reason is that the third image there from left to right, West Ham chances conceded away, is Odegaard. I think Odegaard could have a great game here, just kind of like creating all around that top of the box in between the two lines there. How do you see this one while I look up some Raya Martin stats?
In my head, this should be one of the most one-sided fixtures in the season, because one team are so good in terms of shape and the other team are so bad. But then you look at the results this season, West Ham have already beaten Arsenal in the domestic cup, and then West Ham have also beaten Arsenal in the return fixture. Now, you can argue that it's variance, and if they replayed the fixture 20 times, Arsenal would probably win sort of 17, 18 of them, draw one, lose one, and we got the one loss. But they are becoming a bit of a bogey team this season for Arsenal, West Ham. And so it doesn't make a lot of sense, because West Ham don't play in a way that really should threaten Arsenal. Arsenal should sort of have the upper hand in all areas, the pressing, the control, and all things like that. But West Ham just keep finding a way in moments in games, whether it's sort of a deflection or a set piece or something like that. Moments just seem to be falling for them. So I'm a bit hesitant to say that Arsenal should be winning this quite comfortably, because I thought that twice this season when they played West Ham and they've lost both the games. So it's all there for Arsenal to control the game, control the tempo, sort of swamp West Ham back into their own half, sort of create overloads in the last line of defence, all these sorts of things. But for whatever reason, it's just not working against West Ham, and West Ham seem to have an answer for them right now. So I'm still going to say that that Arsenal should win again, but it feels like it should be quite a comfortable win, despite what the data's saying on the screen. It feels like it should be sort of quite a routine sort of 2-3-0 win for Arsenal. But something tells me that it's going to be sort of harder work than that. But I do agree that it could be good for Odegaard. It depends what West Ham, in theory, should have strengthened their central midfielder. If they play Edson Alvarez and Calvin Phillips together, that's quite a good sort of defensive, disciplined midfield duo with sort of attributes that offer a bit of everything. So West Ham, in theory, should be harder to break down with sort of a reasonably good back two, and then two holding midfielders right in front of them will maintain the position. So West Ham, you feel like, should do quite well at shutting down space centrally and keeping the centre quite compact. And in theory, then it's the wide players that have the impact. Probably Martinelli, really, because I don't really like the West Ham right side so much. So I feel like Martinelli could have the advantage down that flank. But West Ham are just very unpredictable week to week. So I'll go as Martinelli being the player I would want if I could pick one player from this. But it really wouldn't surprise me if this was 1-1 or something going into the next game week. We look back and think, how did that happen? Because it's already happened twice.
Yeah, I can see that. I mean, it is both Souček and Edson Alvarez. They do have a tendency to get forward a little bit, so I think there's an opportunity there. And Souček isn't really the shield, I guess, that for that back line. That's not the way he plays, really. So I think that, but I think point taken, Edson Alvarez is a quality player, and I can see. I like Martinelli against Sofal. I think that's a decent matchup, and I think Martinelli could even get like some. I wouldn't be surprised if Sofal got a yellow card and then had to play more conservatively, or if Martinelli even got a pen out of that. So we'll move on here to the next one. The one thing I'll say about West Ham as well is one of the reasons they're so poor in open play is because, well, they're missing a 9, and their two best players play the same position. So it's always tricky when you're trying to squeeze that in. And I think somebody in the chat here is asking, like, what happened to Arsenal? What happens to Arsenal data? This is Arsenal's data away. It's just Arsenal are a completely different team away. We talked about it last week as well. Like, just for reference, let's see. Arsenal at home in the last 6 home, they have the most big chances. They have 29 big chances in the last 6 home. away, they have 14, which is still like a decent amount. But obviously half of what they do at home. They've only scored 6 of those 14 compared to 11 of the 29. So that's just a little example of what happens to Arsenal's data when we look at it away. It just always turns red. It did that a couple weeks ago.
They're not very free flowing, are they? I think there's clearly a strategy from Arteta that they're going back to the 1990s sort of ethos of Arsenal. We win 1-0 under when George Graham was the manager. And I'm not saying Arsenal necessarily setting up that defensively to try and win 1-0, but I think there's been a clear sort of goal that defence first, and then hopefully they'll score 1 or 2 and still win games, but they're missing that sort of ruthless finisher. Maybe a bit like what Man City were like 3 or 4 years ago, and they obviously went and dealt with that by signing Haaland, who then obviously gets them enough goals. And it's ironic that Arsenal have got Jesus up front now when that old school Man City team had Jesus up front. So I think Arsenal are still a work in progress. They're probably an attacker light, and maybe someone more of a De Bruyne type mindset. You mentioned earlier in the Man City matchup preview how much he drifts and sort of is prepared to run around players and roam across the pitch. I don't think Odegaard's quite as dynamic as that. And as much as he's quite useful, I think someone who's a bit more dynamic, a bit more of a willing runner in that position, while still maintaining that level of creativity, would really help Arsenal. So I think there's still 1 or 2 players short, but they're not quite as free-flowing going forward as the likes of Man City and Liverpool are, it feels like. And they're playing to win sort of tight games is how they're sort of setting up.
Yep. Agreed. We'll move on to the next one here. There we go. Here's your team: Aston Villa versus Manchester United. Villa with the strangely low NetxG at home. It's usually been soaring all season long, bright green, but not so much this week. Villa 1.59 NetxG, Manchester United 1.17. Villa kind of on the back of a central zonal matchup there with 4.5 in the central zone. And solid shot-based goal predictor for Villa, which with a 50% chance of 2 or more goals. Just some stats I have here. Manchester United conceded the most chances from the center, 36, and the third most from the right, 27 in the last 6 away games. So conceding from the center and the right kind of plays to Villa's hands, if you will. When you guys want to bring it up, the center and that left-hand side with Alex Moreno. And those stats, when again, like similarly to like when Liverpool, the right and the center line up for Trent, I feel like when the left and the center line up for Villa, that kind of screams Watkins to me. So I'll be interested to get your perspective on that, and tell me if you're the one that brought this idea to my attention that Villa will likely be in a back 5. How do you see this game playing out in general?
I think it's very worrying based on how Villa played against Chelsea in the FA Cup replay, because that was probably our strongest team for the moment. Obviously, I would say Konsa and Carlos are our best 2 defenders, and now they're both out. And so we're left with not really having an inverted fullback anymore that plays in a back 3 in attacking shape. So Cash and Moreno will both look to get forward. So then we have to build up a different way, which usually means that Boubacar Kamara drops into defensive line when Villa have got the ball. But by him moving backwards, other people's positions all change. It's just a lot more movement in the Villa system, and it leaves us a bit more open to being transitioned on. And I feel like Manchester United have got similar issues in many ways to Chelsea, and Chelsea still just absolutely dominated us in the FA Cup for the most part of that game. So it puts me off Villa a little bit here. I think I've got no confidence at the moment for Villa. We've obviously started the season really well. I thought our stats around goals was a bit inflated then, and I think it's now come back in line with some level of normality. I still think in any given moment, Watkins can score goals and we'll get chances. We have enough attackers around him to supply for him. But at the moment, I just feel like Villa are a bit defensively light and a bit attacking short. The system that we're being asked to play, I think, takes maybe 1 attacking player out of our attacking shape, which leaves us 1 player light in attack. And the fact we've lost both our best defenders means that we're a little bit more dependent on Emi Martinez to save us in defence. So I think in all forms, Villa are a bit of an avoid at the moment. I've got Alex Moreno, and I'm probably going to bench him for this game because I know you've highlighted there that from an attacking standpoint, it could be quite a good one for him against Dalot. Don't disagree with that. But I've literally got no sort of faith at all in Villa keeping a clean sheet in this game. So do we want to pick a defender with that mentality. I don't know who would you pick here, Moreno or Porro this week if you had to start one of those two. They're both at home, and they're both arguably unlikely to keep a clean sheet, aren't they? So who's more likely to get an attacking return is what you're playing, I think. That's sort
tough.
of a big decision.
And it might be. Well, I don't know. Do you think on that right hand side is it going to be Bailey or like because I figured Cash will play right center back, right?
He'll play right back in a 4, so it'll be 4. It'll be Cash, Carlos, Longley, and Moreno, I think, as a back 4. Kamara, Louise, McGinn will probably play in front with Bailey and then Tielemans and Watkins. I think that's probably our strongest team. So Bailey should be the one up against Luke Shaw. And most of the good stuff Villa are doing for the last sort of handful of game weeks have been initiated by him. So he's almost our most important player going forward, I think, Bailey. If he has a bad game, Villa don't tend to create very much, it feels like. So
I guess I was envisioning well, Pau Torres apparently is he's fit, he's good to go. Is that, can you confirm or deny?
I haven't seen that. I'm not saying it's wrong, but I haven't seen it. So I'll have a double check now.
Yeah, if you can have a look real quick. He's not showing up on the Premier Injury site. So I think he's healthy. And the way I was seeing this was a back 3, and then but of Cash on the right, Pau and Longley. So the back 3, and then Bailey as the right wing back with which Emery has done before, and Alex Moreno as the left wing back. But I think with the uncertainty and the defensive injuries, I would probably go Porro over Moreno.
Yeah, that's what I've got at the moment. So I think until Villa get sort of some of their players back and sort of a bit more of a routine again, it feels like we're chopping and changing a lot, and the players that are getting injured are causing knock-on effects to the system, which isn't helping the way we're playing. So we have gone off the boil, it feels like, since we had those 2 1-0 wins over Arsenal and Man City. We've been quite unreliable since then. And I guess the worrying part is just how open we've felt defensively. And I think that since Torres has been injured has been a notable loss. I didn't rate him as a defender, but I always felt like his attribute was his sort of pass progression that helped us get up the pitch. But I think he must be sort of in charge of the offside line and things like that as well. And we've noticed we've been a lot worse without him. So, yeah, I couldn't advocate starting a Villa player in this game. If you got Watkins, you would start him. But we mentioned earlier, if you could sell him for Tony, you probably would. And I'm even debating whether to start Garnacho in this game, because I benched him last week when we said on here that we thought he could do well. I said on here I think I was going to start him, and I bottled it 10 minutes before the deadline and benched him, and he scored 2 goals. And I feel like this could be another game where he does quite well. So at the moment he's benched again because it's probably the easiest of my 8 attackers to bench. But I'm not happy to do that again because he could do something in this game.
Okay, I think as we transition to the next fixture here, I want to throw Val's comment. Ollie Watkins has not scored against Manchester United in 11 Premier League games. So do what you will with that piece of unverified information. Hopefully it's not fake news, Val. And final fixture of the game week, Crystal Palace hosting Chelsea. You'll notice, like, I'm gonna be honest, I didn't want to write about this fixture at all. how much shorter it is than all the other ones.
I thought he was running out of time, Gabe. I didn't realise it was a lack of interest in the fixture. I thought he was just a bit strained for time, no?
No, I gotta be honest. Like, I mean, if Nkunku weren't playing, I could not have less interest in this fixture. I mean, yeah, I don't know. I don't have anything else to say than that. Chelsea have conceded the joint 3rd most big chances and the joint most goals in the last 6 away games. That's all I have to say about this. Do you have anything on this one?
Only I obviously watched the FA Cup replay with Villa yesterday, and they did look a lot more improved. The build-up looked a little bit more stable through the midfield. I think Enzo Fernandez played a little bit deeper and was actually more involved. I think him and Gallagher were very good in front of Caicedo. I think that 3 worked really well against Villa. And then obviously they had Palmer and Madueke, I also thought had quite a bright game. So whether that's a turning point for Chelsea or a one-off, we obviously don't know. Crystal Palace look a team in free fall to me at the moment. They probably are the team to target after Sheffield United. So you're not going to be buying Chelsea players, obviously, because they blank. Well, they've got Man City next, and then they blank. So over the next 3 game weeks, they're arguably the sort of bottom of what would be like a fixture ticker, because the next 2 weeks are bad. But you've got to have high hopes for Cole Palmer. I know we haven't got no captaincy metric here, but he generally seems to be near the top of it. And he's got to be near the top of it again for this game, right? Because he's playing a team that looks so open at the moment. And I'm assuming Eze and Elise won't be there again. So it's got to be a strong game for Cole Palmer, whether he plays as a 10, whether he plays off the right, or whether he plays centre forward. He played sort of just off Nicholas Jackson yesterday, and I think he was as involved as he always is. I don't think it really matters where he plays, right? He just tends to get himself involved in the game. So I think a few people have been talking about selling him this week. I'm not keen to do that. I think next week is different, but I wouldn't want to be selling him for this game. It feels like it's, of all of the fixtures lately where he's sort of been tipped to get some returns, this one I would put near the top of the list. Watch him get no points now after I've just said that, but it feels like he should do quite well.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, any decent fixture Chelsea have, even if it is away from home, and all stats aside, I think Palmer is an option. I thought it was interesting against you guys in the cup. Nico Jackson played on the left, and Palmer stayed at as the 9, but he was a little bit on the right side. It was not quite a 2 because you know, Madueke was involved as well.
It tended to be popping. I know he obviously scored his goal from in the middle of the box, Nicholas Jackson, but he seemed to be quite central most of the time I saw him. I wasn't paying ultimate attention to his positioning, to be honest. I was more trying to keep an eye on the midfield battle between Gallagher and Enzo against Luiz and Kamara. That was what was sort of piquing my attention the most. But it maybe a bit like Foden last week, that he was playing off the left really, but at the big moments he found himself in the middle of the area, and maybe that's a new role for Jackson, that they could use him to do that. Palmer with a bit more of a free roll through the middle, and then the more regular Liverpool are obviously doing it, aren't they? Playing a striker off the wing, and it's working for them at the moment with Darwin. So could Chelsea do that with an Nkunku or a Jackson? Maybe it could work for them as well, to have naturally someone who's more at home through the middle, attacking from the flanks instead.
Nkunku came on late in that game, did okay, came in for Nico Jackson there on the left hand side. Okay, cool, interesting. Do get your questions in there. We're gonna move on to, what do we have? I think the next slide is the summary, and we'll talk about Wildcard. We'll talk about Craig's decisions. He's got some big decisions this week with 2 free transfers. I have 2 free transfers as well. I don't feel like my decisions are as big though, because I do own Liverpool players. So get your questions in. We have started a few already, and we'll take the questions from Discord as well. So as we move on to the summary slide here at an hour 23, let's see. Things that stand out, I think Crystal Palace data against Chelsea at 2.06 NetxG stands out a little bit, and something that I would question and certainly not buy into, given that Eza and Elise will probably be absent. Some Fulham at 1.72 home to Bournemouth, I do kind of buy that one, and I wouldn't be surprised if we see some creativity from the left side, even though I did mention Bobby Dick or Drover Reed has an opportunity there on the right. Liverpool, obviously highest NetxG of the week, 2.27. Just wondering who's going to start where in that one. Luton with 2.08, the second highest NetxG of the game week, home to Burnley. Home to Sheffield United. It'll be interesting to see if people start getting attackers from there, specifically Adebayo as a cheap enabling forward. Manchester City is obvious. Forest is an interesting one, but we're not really buying attackers from them. Spurs 2.07, and then Wolves against home to Brentford 1.95 are the other standouts. Now, let's talk first about Wildcard, and then get into maybe what some of your decisions are, Craig. And let's just talk about, like, overall, just we'll give it. Let's not go more than 10 minutes so we can get some of the questions in here. We're at an hour 25 just about. So let's start at the back. Goalkeepers. I'll throw in mine and then see what you think. I think Raya and Dubravka are the two best, and it's really purely about value. It's an easy way into Arsenal defense. You could even double up if we're looking at value with Raya and Gabriel. And then Dubravka likely to play the rest of the season. 4 point something change, I think, is a no-brainer. What do you think?
Well, I'm glad you said that. They're my two keepers that I wildcarded a couple of weeks ago, so that's good that you agree with that. I do think there's an argument now I got rid of Flecken on my wildcard. I'm not his biggest fan. I don't think he saves enough until we played Man City last week and made about 10 saves. But the fact he's now got a double next week, the fact he plays 26 and he plays 29, if you go with Raya and Dubravka, depending on your plan for game week 29, you won't have a goalkeeper, more than likely. Both of them likely to blank as things stand. So if you've got one eye on game week 29 and you're wildcarding now, then Flecken's probably is worth having. But whether you want to pay that little bit extra for the backup goalkeeper, people might feel a bit uncomfortable paying 4.5 for a keeper they're only going to use sort of in 1 or 2 weeks. But you could justify it by the fact you'd have a keeper for 29. So I don't disagree with Raya and Dubravka. It's my two keepers, but I think Flecken is on the table now as well.
Okay, I think that's fair. Back line, give us a back line, a back five. I'm going to bring the players up by ownership. And just while you give us kind of the back five off the top of your head here.
So if we're talking about current prices, not just if people have already got Pedro Porro, for example, and bought him for like 5 million, I wouldn't advocate selling him at the minute. I'd still keep him. But if you don't have him, I wouldn't probably put him in my wild card and pay whatever the current price is for him. It's about 5.8, isn't it, or something now? So I wouldn't bring him in for that price. I would have one Liverpool defender. It might come down to budget. I think you probably would prefer to have Trent. But if you can't get to the team you want with your full wild card and need to save money, I don't think it's a problem to come down to Van Dijk, because I think you probably will want to sell this Liverpool defender before game week 28, 29. So a Liverpool defender will say. I think Doughty has to go in now with the double next week. I think Reguilon probably goes in as well now with the double next week. And the fixtures they're the obvious three, I think. Reguilon, Doughty and a Liverpool, Trent or Van Dijk. I think I'd probably put Branthwaite in because he's 4.1. Everton keeps surprising with clean sheets. Just quite a handy sort of fifth defender that you can call upon whenever you need them. If you need a defender for game week 26, he plays against Brighton. And I probably would go Gabriel for the other one, just because, as you say, I think Arsenal are just probably the best defence in the league still. So when in doubt, just pick a defender. He still offers routes to points with goals and things, doesn't he? So I'd probably go, if money was sort of, we are focused on budget and stuff here, I'd go Trent, Doughty, Reguilon, Gabriel and Branthwaite. Any big disagreement?
Yeah, no, honestly, no strong disagreement. I mean, we may differ on player like here and there, like, but I think that back five makes a lot of sense. Well, I guess one thing I'll ask is, well, do you know who the highest owned defender is?
Who would I guess that? Is it still Saliba or someone like that? Porro?
Close. Saliba's 36% at second. Porro's 33.8%. There's a defender that's more highly owned than 36%.
Trippier?
Yep. 40% ownership. Trippier.
I couldn't do it with the way Newcastle have been defending the last couple of weeks. I know he's got attacking capabilities and things, but he doesn't have a double. He's likely going to blank in 29. The clean sheets aren't offering the same promise as what they were sort of earlier in the season and the back end of last year. I don't hate it. If you own him now, I wouldn't be desperate to sell him necessarily, but I don't think I'd own him on a wild card.
Yeah, I get it. That makes sense. Okay, cool. Let's go to midfield. I'll filter this one, check out the midfielders here. I think that there's a big question, and like there's a lot of debate around the midfield. Certainly Saka and Palmer are included among that. Who would be your midfield selections if you're wildcarding this game week? Who do you want? Jota's in.
Yeah, I think that he would be in. Would you have that? Well, that's the question. Would you have 3 Liverpool if you were wild carding this week, knowing they blanked 26, and you're probably going to have to start dealing with them at that point? Or would you have 2?
Maybe not. I think that's fair. I'd probably have 2. If I were wild carding this week, I'd probably have 2. Yeah.
Yeah, and this is where we differ, because I think I'd rather have Darwin than Jota. I know you disagree, and that's fine. So I'd probably have Darwin as one of my 3 strikers, which would probably mean I wouldn't have Jota in my midfield.
Right.
So I'd probably have Foden and De Bruyne. I'd have both of those 2. I'd have Garnacho, I think, because he's cheap and he's quite helpful for 26. I've not got no strong thoughts on the other 2. I think there's plenty of options for the other 2. You could go to a Wolves midfielder now. I don't hate that. You probably want one for 26, so I don't see the harm in. You'd have to pick one without knowing quite the impact of Hwang coming back, so it's a bit risky. But I wouldn't hate going for one of them now. I think Saka's just still a nice hold for an extended period. You kind of know what you're going to get with him, or Martinelli. Saka's minutes are a bit more secure and things, aren't they? I think the one thing I would say, I wouldn't have Palmer if I was wildcarding now. It might be a question more you wouldn't have, because I think this week's good, but I don't think after this week, I don't think you really need him until game week 30. And as much as he's good value for money and things, I think the midfield is so good for upside picks. I wouldn't want to carry
27 and 28 are both good.
One of the best,
27 and 28 are both good.
I'd be quite happy not to have him until Burnley in game week 30. I'm likely to sell him next week for De Bruyne. I've got enough money to do that. And as much as 27 and 28, you could play him and he may well do well. I think there's other midfielders. You'd probably be moving on to Tottenham midfielders around that point, for example. They might end up being just as good or better than Palmer. So it's one of those where if you're going to make big advantages and get big gains, I think you have to pick your battles in terms of taking on high ownership. Because obviously it's a big risk if that high ownership player does well and you don't have him, as I found out last week with no Ollie Watkins. Obviously my rank suffered because he was quite well owned and he did really well. And you're taking that risk by not going with Palmer. But I say the fixtures, there's enough in the fixtures to me to think that he's disposable for a handful of weeks. So I think the Foden, De Bruyne and probably Garnacho are the 3 I'd be keen to have. The other 2, no massive strong opinions on. I don't know if you'd say it could be Jota and you don't have Darwin up front. It could be a Wolves midfielder. And I'm sure there's a few others people might want to drop into the chat as well. There's quite a lot of options in midfield, aren't there?
Yeah, and I think I'd prefer Jota and Adebayo to Darwin and Garnacho. I think that's the difference.
Yeah, fine. I couldn't have a strong argument against that.
That's fair. That's just two sides to that. So fair enough. And then up front is interesting because there are different ways you could go, right? There are some interesting ways you could go. You could go Adebayo, Tony, and Maupay. Example.
I do think this is the first time for a long time in FPL where the pool of strikers is so deep. It's felt very unusual for me to play FPL and think you really could do some sort of striker hokey-cokey like every week. There's arguably 7 or 8 strikers here that all stand out. And if you've got the rest of the base of your team set up well with the goalkeepers, defenders, midfielders, that your free transfer every week could be used to jump around strikers. So, for example, for next week, you might want Haaland, Darwin and Tony, for example. They've all got doubles. It's quite soon after you're going to want Solanke back. Quite soon after you're going to want Watkins back. So if you set your team up properly, you could just keep jungling around these 5 or 6 strikers, taking one out for another one. So A goes out for B, then C goes out for D, then we sell C for A and all this sort of thing. And you're constantly rotating them. And I think it could be quite beneficial to do that. These strikers are obviously capable of returning in any game. Selling Tony for any fixture, for example, is dangerous. Because I don't think it really matters what fixture Tony's got. He's just as likely to score in my eyes. But if you're a fixture sort of manager that likes to play the fixtures, I think there's enough in rotating strikers in the coming game weeks that it could be quite profitable. So if you want to go for a bit more of a stable midfield, a bit of a safer midfield where you're playing a bit more long term, I think it's a viable strategy to sort of use all your transfers on strikers and juggle them already. If they put Cunha in that for Wolves, they've got Sheffield United soon. I think he comes into this as an option. You've mentioned Adebayo as an option. You've obviously got the obvious 5 or 6 that most of us have already got or considering. So exciting times for strikers. I've not really known a period like this in FPL for quite a few seasons now, where there's been quite so many options. Most season it feels like it's Harry Kane and 2 others, right, or 1 other, and that's it. It's kind of fixed. This year feels a bit different to that.
Yeah, totally. Just to go down the list of forwards or the forward options. So you have Holland, which for most people it's a stalwart, right? Stays there. Holland, Watkins, Alvarez maybe not so much an option anymore. Solanke, Darwin, Joao Pedro, Cunha, Tony, Højlund, who I think we're gonna start talking more about.
Yep. Another one. Yeah.
Who else? Gabriel Jesus, Adebayo. So yeah, and Nkunku maybe coming into the conversation as well. We'll see if he can stay healthy and Chelsea can do something good like they did against you guys. So yeah, it's interesting how people are differentiating. I'm differentiating up front by going Joao Pedro, and obviously he has Spurs, which I think is a good matchup this week. Sheffield United, then Everton, Fulham, Forest. So that's my chunk of Joao Pedro exposure for the time being. All right, cool. I think we covered that. Let's get straight to the questions here. We'll kind of skip our teams. We'll go to the questions. Start with Discord. Do get your questions in. Go to the two faces here. We already answered the one on Wildcard. We just did that. This one's from Thingamabob. If you're looking to bet completely against the field with no Holland, how do you do it? Pray that Salah is fit for both Gameweek 25 games. Rely on leaks that De Bruyne starts the games. Big at the back with Trippier and company. How would you differentiate from going Holland?
We just said, right, there's about 10 strikers that all kind of make sense at the moment, week to week. So I think if there is a time to go without him, I think this is a viable time. It's very risky with this double, right? There's going to be a lot of triple captains being thrown around next week as well. Do you want to take that on? He's going to be he's going to be the most popular captain for probably the next 2 game weeks. And in one of them, he's going to be triple captain by a substantial amount of managers as well. So I think it's very risky. I think you just have to pick an angle that you're happy with. So maybe you go with a wild card with triple Liverpool defence, for example. I'm not advocating doing that, but if they keep 3 clean sheets in the next 2 game weeks, you're going to more than cover Haaland's points if you've got Trent Robertson and Van Dijk or something, and they keep a load of clean sheets. Or you pick another sort of block of something. You might pick triple Liverpool attack and hope that covers Haaland. Maybe it's Jota, Darwin, and Luis Diaz or something, and you hope that does really well. So I wouldn't do it personally, but I think you have to take a big stand on something else if you're going to go against Haaland. So go block on, probably a defence would be my argument. Go triple Arsenal defence and hope that works out for you or something. Because you need...
Don't do it. I've done that.
Big to... No good?
Pain.
Pain.
I tried taking on Saka with triple Arsenal defence. Didn't work.
Yeah, I wouldn't do it personally, no, Haaland. I think it's just the damage it could cause is just so big. If he gets 3-4 goals in a double game week and everyone's triple captained him, and you don't have him at all, that rank drop is not worth taking on in my eyes. But
yeah, I think I agree. But to answer the question, there's not, without Salah and with Son not having blanks, you could go maybe early on Son or something like that, right? And that differentiate that way. But with the fixtures and the number of fixtures and the ownership, I just, it's not the right time to go without Holland. When Salah comes back, then you can, maybe there's a decision to make on that front. Let's go on to these questions. Now we're 38. Let's do them kind of quick fire here to get out, and then maybe the next 10 minutes. Blue Danube Joe. Good evening. Is there any importance in a player or team's record against another team when it comes to FPL?
To me, it's more managers. I'm not a big fan of this team have beat this team the last 5 times when Team B's had 3 different managers in that time, because the managers have different tactics and different styles, and that impacts how the game flows and how the matchup is. If you're looking at something more like Liverpool v Brentford right now, Klopp and Frank have played each other like 3-4 seasons in a row now. So I think you can take an element of what's happened before into account for something like that. But when you're looking at, it's more the managers rather than the fact it's been team A keep beating team B. That's more important to me.
Agreed. Clint says midfield of Gordon, KDB, Palmer, Saka, Foden currently. Saka to Jota for a -4, attacking the next 2 and double game week, 0 free transfers and only 0.2 million in the bank. Plan is to have 2 free transfers in 26 to take out Jota later. So Jota in for a -4 for the next 2 and then out.
Yeah, so it's going to cost you 2 transfers to get him in and out and 4 points. Is his upside that much in the next 2 game weeks to justify that? I would say no. You may have a different take, but I don't think it's worth 4 points and blocking in 2 transfers.
Yeah, I'd probably agree with you there. I have to bite the bullet on that one and go without Jota, Clint. Colm says, is it better to take a -4 this game week if it lets you have 2 free transfers before game week 26?
Team dependent, right? I think that's quite a hard question to answer. As it's not one size fits all, I don't think, is it, for this one?
No, we need more context. Like if you're bringing Jota in for a -4, and then part of your 2 free transfers is getting rid of Jota in 26, and we just answered that no. So we need more transfer there, Com. More context there, Com. Tricky MF. What about Allison as a cheaper route to minutes if you're set up well or have other plans elsewhere? This one's an interesting one because it does free up a defender spot if you want to go in a different direction and maybe save some money from the likes of Trent. What do you think?
Yeah, I don't hate it. Definitely on a wild card, I would think about it. I think it's viable on a wild card to go with him. I agree that there's not many players that I'd be confident play sort of over 200 minutes for Liverpool across the next 2 game weeks. He's going to be top of the list, isn't he, for minutes? And so if that's your main concern, so I'm edging my bets a little bit with Van Dijk as in terms of outfield players playing the most minutes, but in terms of the whole squad, you'd think Alisson's going to be first. So yeah, unusual to make a goalkeeper transfer though, isn't it?
Yeah. Next one, Panenka Productions. Gross, Esto, or Gusto for first sub.
Oh dear. You got to bench one of those 3.
They're all benched.
Are they? You got a bench boost if you've got those 3 on the bench, haven't you? So the same bench this week to be going in with. They're the subs.
Yeah, you could bench boost this week. Maybe it looks better next week. I'm just gonna take a stab because it's a sub question. So put Estupinian for sub. Stewie Bryan, Saka a potential sell for KDB?
Yeah. If that's what needs, if that's what's needed, yeah, I think it's. Yeah. I'm going to try and use Palmer or Richarlison as mine because I think they're better sells than Saka, but I don't hate Saka depending on the setup of your team.
Cool. Where am I here? Ignatius Bryan says, play Saliba or Udogi?
Saliba.
Agreed. Clint, what do you think of Saka as an FPL asset in general moving forward?
I think he's fine to keep, but I also think he's disposable. So again, depends on what your priorities are and who else you've got. The fact he now blanks 29 most likely is more of a reason to sell him than this time yesterday. But you kind of know what you're getting from him. Safe minutes in a good team, right? It's quite hard to give that up sometimes. But I think that if you're looking for 5 midfielders with more upside, there probably are 5 at the moment. So I don't hate the idea of selling him. I thought about it for a while, but I'm not going to now.
Right on. Nehal, thoughts on Watkins and Estupinian to Tony and Doughty for -4?
You're going to get the 4 points back just in appearances next game week, can't you? It's 4 fixtures for 2, isn't it, next week? So that's the 4 points back. So, yeah, I'd say that's fair. Do you have to do them both this week, or could you do one? Say Watkins to Tony, in theory, could wait. You could just do a Estupinian to Doughty this week and then do Watkins to Tony for free next week. Might be an option. But in terms of 2 for 2, then, yeah, seems fair enough.
Yeah. K7. What's a good Gordon replacements beside Jota?
Depends who you've got and how much money you've got, right? If you need to go down in price, it's probably Neto from Wolves, isn't it?
Yeah, it could be. It depends what you're doing as well. It depends how many City players you have. It depends what you're planning for. It depends what your chip strategy is. So there, we'll need more on about that K7. But yeah, Wolves players, good shout. Wolves. Oh, I already did this one. And last one. Gameweek24 captain. There was no captaincy metric this time around, so we need to do a Gameweek24 captaincy discussion really quick here in 5 minutes. Who are you currently on?
I'm currently on Haaland by default, but so I said earlier, I'm not convinced he plays loads of minutes. I am worried about it being a physical game where he could re-injure himself. And did I see enough of him last week when he started to make me feel like he's really sort of back on the road to big hauls again? I thought he did enough in the game, but it wasn't like he was massively involved, right? He didn't sort of get you really confident that he was back to be scoring hat-tricks. I wasn't worried about his performance. He didn't play badly as such, but most of the chances didn't fall to him right in that game. There was Alvarez mainly in the first half that everything was falling to and things like that. So
it was a back three. So there are mitigating circumstances there. But I think your points are good on like how he's not dominating. He's not dominating opposing defenders, and he's going to be up against physical defenders that he's not dominating. So there are question marks there for sure. I'm not on Haaland.
You captain Liverpool. You captain Jota.
Yeah.
I couldn't put someone off doing that. The data we've seen so far had Liverpool with the highest capability of goals, right? So if you've got a Liverpool, I don't even hate the idea of captaining Darwin if you own him this week. I could see the appeal of captaining a Liverpool player for definite, even Trent or something. I wouldn't put someone off captaining a Liverpool player for this game. I probably will captain Haaland. I've not got enough faith in my other players, whether it's Foden, whether it's Palmer. I think those particular two have got good possibilities of points this week, but not to the point where I'm massively confident they outscore Haaland. But one of the Liverpool attackers, I could definitely get behind that. It's just unlikely at the moment I'm going to own one.
Yeah, I'm just going through the chat here. Let's see if those in the chat, tell us who you're captaining. Yeah, there is no captaincy metric this week. Mariner is a little bit out of commission, so there's some shouts. It's between Jota and Darwin for me, says Nehal. Val, whoops, welcome to the end game. That's the wrong one. Val says Val's on Jota Darwin for Nehal. Don't hate Palmer cap. Oh, no Gay. Is that right? Who's going to play on the left?
He went off in the first half injured last week.
Oh, I see.
I haven't seen an update about current state of his fitness, but he definitely went off in the first half.
That could be a good opportunity for Palmer then already, and a good matchup. But he's away then, and there are good teams with good fixtures at home. So that's where I would lean for the home guys. And now Ron Cupboard comes in. He says easy Haaland for him. Thingamabob, Ross Barkley all the way. Going for broke with Ross Barkley, and Colm is Jota or Trent. All of them good options. I like the Liverpool options myself. I think that they have the biggest upside. I think it's easier for things to get tricky for City than it is for Liverpool. So
I think I've mentioned obviously on here tonight that I'm a bit hesitant about bringing Liverpool attacker in because it's a transfer in now and a transfer out. So two transfers quite close together. Someone was asking earlier about doing it for a hit. The only way I think I could justify any of that in my own head is if I was going to captain a Liverpool player to this game week. If he was going to bring Darwin in even for a hit this week and captain him, I think that obviously tilts it a bit more in favour of doing it. So that's something for me to consider. I've got 2 free transfers, so I'm going to get Van Dijk, I think, in with one of them. I could use the second one on turning Solanke into Darwin for the next couple of weeks and then reverse it before game week 28. And if I can be convinced that Darwin's the best captain over Haaland, then I may go through and do it.
Interesting. I'll be curious to see if you're going to take on Liverpool against Burnley. That'll be scary. Nima's coming in saying he's on Haaland as well. Not surprised there, but Haaland will be a popular shout. I'm sure he'll creep back up over 100%. Nehal said something, but I'm afraid we've run out of time, Nehal. I'm not going to display that message. Won't display anything that starts with Darwin was gold. Sorry, buddy. So thank you all for joining us. This has been the Net That Haul Gameweek 24 matchups show. I have been joined by man on pod, Craig. Craig, thank you, man.
No problem. Anytime, mate.
And very enjoyable. Let us know. Yeah, in the Discord, if you guys are in the Discord, let us know what you're doing. Let's have a little chat in there. I might be around tomorrow if someone wants to hit the hangout in the Discord. If not, see you on X, see you wherever. Nehal's trying to get his comments in there. I'm sorry, Nehal, we're just out of time. We're just gonna have to go. Thank you. Thanks for participating though. Love you. Peace.